guys, welcome back to another episode of Space Try. I'm your host, DC.
And I'm your co-host, Bailey Wilson.
Today we have a really exciting special topic that we wanted to talk to you guys about, but let's give a little bit of a recap on our last episode.
Yeah, so last episode we talked about the Zombie in Space program. We talked about some of the logistics of the program, the facilities that they used, kind of like what they believed in and what they kind of had set up going into space. And yeah, but this episode we are going to be talking about mental health, specifically in the aerospace industry. So today for you guys, we have two distinct stories, one about Lisa Nowak and one about James Donald Halsell Jr. And then we're going to dive deeper into the mental health atmosphere in the aerospace industry.
Yeah, I think when we were researching this topic, it was really interesting and very different. Just in terms of the experience, I think, because at least for me, before researching this topic, I feel like being in the aerospace industry or working as an astronaut or really just anything that's space adjacent, it's really glorified. And it's seen as this perfect, amazing, beautiful career. And so we always really focus on the amazing parts of it and the space exploration and all the cool things that astronauts could possibly do. But I think that after researching this topic, at least for me, I found out a lot of kind of the downsides or the harsh pain points of the job, if you will, that people don't really talk about. How would you feel?
Yeah, so like any career, there's definitely some negatives and some tolls that it could possibly take on your mental health. But I feel like for astronauts, we see a lot of astronaut movies and different forms of media that portray astronauts and people in the aerospace industry as this icon, and that nothing in their career is going wrong, and that nothing could break the stride that they're on. But the reality of it is a very intense career, and it could take many tolls on your mental health, whether it be anxiety about a specific situation or any other type of mental disorder.
I definitely agree. So one of the case studies that Bailey kind of previewed was about James Donald Halsell Jr. So there's this really interesting article from the New York Times in 2020 that kind of talked about his situation. And essentially, he was a former NASA space shuttle commander and veteran of 5 space shuttle missions. But then he was sentenced to 4 years in prison and 10 years probation because he committed manslaughter. So just a little bit more, according to the biography on the NASA website, Mr. Halsell joined the space agency in 1990, and then he became an astronaut in 1991. So by 2000, he had been a pilot or a mission commander on 5 separate trips and had logged more than 1,250 hours in space. Mr. Stur Devant called his client an American hero, and they also said that Mr. Halsell had been in the Air Force. So he had a very impressive history with the space agency and with the military. He had done a lot of work. He had logged a lot of hours. And so he was definitely an expert in his domain. But in terms of the car crash, which, happened in 2016, the James Halsell was on probation actually for an earlier crash that had happened in California while he was under the influence of alcohol. So on this particular crash that led to the death of multiple people involved on June 6th, he crashed in Tuscaloosa County, Alabama, killing Naomi James, who was 11, and her sister Jayla Parler, who was 13, who their father was driving at the time in the car. And Mr. Halsell had refused to allow law enforcement officials at the time to check his blood for alcohol or controlled substances, according to prosecutors who were involved in the case. And so this was just one story that was extremely shocking, because I think driving under the influence and, manslaughter is very serious. And typically when we look at alcoholism, just as kind of a specific problem, it tends to be associated with a lot of underlying mental health issues that haven't really been addressed. And it's typically seen as a coping mechanism for people who are unable to really deal with those emotions that can at times be intense. And so we don't really know what happened in his life in particular that kind of caused him to really end up in such an unfortunate, situation that really robbed the lives of 2 really sweet girls and, impacted their family and the community as a whole. But what we do know is that this was such an outlier in terms of just everything that we hear about in the news and media relating to these crimes. And it kind of makes you wonder, like, how did this happen? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I feel like part of it definitely has to come like from his career. I mean, he went on 5 missions, logged over 1,000 hours, like you said, which is like not an easy feat. And I'm guessing that it had most likely taken a like toll on his mental health and a toll on just like his life in general. And I feel like maybe the answer to him at the time was alcohol, which is pretty sad. Like that you could build up your career and build up like this repertoire, but like the mental like sphere around it is like kind of like what is your downfall with like, the
Yeah.
career.
It's unfortunate, but it is a reality for many people. And it's not even just, I think typically when we think of alcoholism, or at least from my understanding of when I've seen it be portrayed, it's like very stressed corporate professionals, people who work in the entertainment industry, or people who have just, I think, a lot of eyes on them, a lot of pressure on them. I think that's like kind of the common denominator because even here, like in academics, it's something that's kind of known. Like at least when I talk to my friends who are in law school, there's a huge drinking culture. Everyone is stressed. They're always drinking. It's become like a more and more popular coping mechanism because of how almost glamorized drinking alcohol is to an extent. Like going to the bars, going to the club, drinking with your coworkers, drinking with your friends, drinking with your family, drinking with literally everyone. And there's unlimited occasions to drink. You can drink if you're happy, you're sad, you're anxious, you're mad. There's just like an unlimited use case for alcohol. And that kind of, I think, just from my hypothesizing here, could kind of lead to an unhealthy consumption of alcohol and lead to kind of situations like this where it's like a big coping strategy.
Yeah, and you talk about a lot about like the social atmosphere of like drinking and how it kind of like creates a culture, but that culture also translates to like drinking as an individual. I mean, it's easy as pie to just come home, crack open a beer and take the edge off with just drinking by yourself. And I feel like that's like it's just kind of like amplifying the situation. It's definitely becoming like more of a problem, and especially because it's like such an accessible like coping mechanism. Like all you need is to be 21 years old and you're gonna have an alcoholic drink in your hand.
Yeah.
Like
And it's even advertised that way. Like, you look at a Bud Light commercial and then they're characterizing like the most chill night in as you crack open a beer, you turn on the TV, watch a sports game, have a bowl of nachos. Like drinking is a very, I think, integrated part of American culture. And so I think like the accessibility of it and how it's, more and more, I think just kind of permeating society and again, becoming a coping mechanism. There's people who have so many mental health, issues that are unaddressed where they're not either able to deal with it or they want to solve the problem as quickly as possible. And because alcohol is a depressant, it can really like suppress those emotions and then the pain that they might be feeling. So in his case in particular, I don't know what kind of caused him to go down that route, but let's talk about mental health in the military and outer space.
yeah, so according to a study done by the NIH titled The Burden of Space Exploration on the Mental Health of Astronauts, it talks about how being in outer space can take a toll on you both mentally and physically. A couple of examples of that, I mean, looking at like the physical side, there's something called microgravity, which like alters the cell physiology by disrupting kind of the structure that it has going on, leading to things including infections, immune disorders, and tons of other different physical like detriments on a person.
Also, just to clarify, the NIH is the National Institute of Health, and this study was really comprehensive. They did like a narrative review that looked at all of the physical and mental health implications that being in space could have on astronauts. So yeah, what Bailey kind of talked about with microgravity affecting cell physiology was like an example of kind of the physical effect of that. It could lead to autoimmune disorders, tissue and skeletal repair issues, and that was kind of just one key feature of how it could affect astronauts in space. But on the mental health side, They also talked about a lot of different implications that it can have on astronauts. And again, this is something that we know now after really studying the effects of space on human beings after decades and decades of research. Also keeping in mind that space exploration has been relatively new. Like, we only really started putting people into space in the late 60s, like early 70s. And so between then and now, we've been able to gather this intel. But yeah, emotional dysregulation, cognitive dysfunction, disruption of the sleep-wake rhythms, visual phenomena, changes in body weight, morphological brain changes are some of like the more commonly reported symptoms of deep space missions. But also, like, there's a lot of other, I'd say, like, interpersonal dynamics that are affected. Like, I think the loss of privacy is a big one. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I mean, living in space during the time of your mission, you're kind of in like this small space with tons of other astronauts, so there's not a lot of privacy going on. And also, kind of to speak on that, it's definitely difficult to live with people like with diverse backgrounds. Like, astronauts come from different genders, different like sizes, different national origins, different spoken language. So it's like there's definitely a lot of factors that come into it, and it's hard to kind of create a relationship with somebody, especially when you kind of really can only see it as a business relationship because you're there for work.
Yeah, I'd say like it extends beyond even that. For example, like I think the business relationship part of it is a little bit stressful because you have to keep the relationship professional enough, but also have enough fun with each other. And I think that's something that translates to a lot of careers. But also, in different cultures, there's different methods of communication or different social norms. And so that can also be a little challenging. I think difference is what makes us unique. But it is also something that can kind of be a barrier sometimes because, again, everybody's different in every single way. Like Bailey mentioned, with your national origin, your ethnicity, your life experience, your gender, just all of these things together. And then being, made to live in an environment where you have to live with them and get along with them and make sure that everybody is having a good time. It can be a little bit stressful, I think, Like, imagine how difficult it is, even just gelling along with your roommates in college when you meet them for the first time and get assigned, to dorms.
Yeah, but like it's even taken to like a whole nother level because like it's crazy because these astronauts are just in space and they're constantly reminded that they're in space. I mean, you look out the window and there's just the entirety of Earth just sitting right there, and I feel like just something as astounding as that could even take like a toll on somebody's mental health because of like the realization of like how important their role is in like just like the aerospace industry, but to humanity and advancement in general.
Yeah, so like not only do you have all this pressure on you because you're representing humanity and you're going out into space and exploring everything. Sorry, we have our daily siren intervention.
They're saving lives right now.
They are. But right, in addition to that, it's like, let's say you have a fight with your coworker or your roommate and just like a daily day-to-day situation. You can leave. You can take time, cool off, leave whatever situation is making you upset, and then come back with like a renewed sense of energy and just the ability to kind of, like just a better ability to have conflict resolution. That space is really important, and I guess that like time to heal is important. And then you're on the International Space Station, you have a fight, you're like, where are you gonna go? You're in the middle of space. Yeah. You can't just walk off the like International Space Station or something. Like, I'm gonna come back when I'm feeling better.
I know, I need time to cool down. I'm gonna go on a spacewalk.
And it's so interesting too because I think like there was another article that kind of talked about this, but essentially on NASA's website they were talking about how if you're in like a deep future like space mission, they would actually require a small team of astronauts to live and work in a confined environment the size of a studio apartment for up to 2.5 years. So imagine literally being in a studio-sized apartment with multiple people every single day, all hours of the day, not for a day, a week, a month, years at a time, while you're literally looking through a hole, watching planet Earth. You can't go anywhere, you can't do anything, and you have to get along with everyone. And there's a lot of pressure on you from the outside to represent humanity well, be the hero and just really contribute to space exploration and just manage everything. That's hard.
Kind of like personalizing it, just staying in the same space for like longer than a day. Like earlier today, I didn't leave my apartment until 5 o'clock. Yes, I was productive. Don't get scared. But even like just coming out of my apartment at like 5 o'clock and just like it just felt like a breath of fresh air. Like it felt like I was kind of revived. But like having to stay in that same space for longer than 2 years is insane.
Genuinely, yeah. And so, the National Institute of Health, that study, they talk a little about more about, some of the other things. So not only are you dealing with like a lack of privacy and just like a lot of, I'd say, interpersonal tension, not necessarily conflict, but just that tension of getting along with everyone, but you're also isolated. You're literally not able to see your friends, your family, your pets, or just really the environment for years at a time in that isolation, and along with being in a confined environment can, lead to what they talk about, like monotony, which is conceptualized as like a threefold model of spatio-temporal, sensory, and social isolation that is potentially detrimental. And I think it's also, like they talk about this as well, that's why they have astronauts engage in like up to like 2 hours of physical exercise every single day, at least from NASA's websites, because you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything, you can't see anyone, you can't really talk to people, and it literally, leads to the sense of monotony that they were talking about, like you're less resilient, you're more tired, you're more passive, you just don't have that, if you don't have that pep in your step, just, get you going, it's so difficult to keep up that energy every single day with those circumstances.
Yeah, and also like I feel like the exercising component is definitely like important because I feel like it can lessen the effects that we already know, the mental and physical effects that come with being in space. I mean, if your muscles and your body is growing while being in a new environment, it kind of would help like adapting to the environment better compared to just remaining the same person in this new environment.
Yeah, or also even just like maintaining kind of the physical fitness that you would need so that when you come back to Earth and you are reintroduced to gravity and all of the other physiological environmental factors of being on that planet, it's not a shock because you are basically subjecting your body to an experience that it is really kind of not designed for. So yeah, it's really important, I think, to have that physical fitness. It's even important here on Earth. I should definitely exercise more, but it's important on Earth, and so definitely more so in space, I think. So what are some like mental health issues that you think might last like longer or kind of shorter? I know that like the study talked about how certain mental health issues that astronauts experience in space, they tend to kind of resolve themselves a lot faster when they come back to Earth, and some have a little bit of I'd say like a longer toll on their psyche. And so what do you kind of think that some of those might be?
So one of the big ones that is kind of coming to mind is definitely anxiety. I feel like the anxiety of like kind of being reintroduced to humanity after being in space for 2+ years, it's valid to have anxiety, like coming back to a whole new environment that you had been gone from for 2 years.
Yeah, there's a lot of anxiety that's attached to, coming back to Earth. And so that can be one thing. I think in terms of like some of the research that I did, I found that in the NIH study, because of the effect of microgravity on, certain motor functions and just kind of being able to dual task and stuff, when you come back to Earth, there's a little bit of like a learning curve. Like it takes like 4 to 5 days again for you to just be like, okay, this is how I walk. I can't, pick up a glass and let go, it'll fall. The dynamics of how you move, I think, will change a lot, but you kind of readapt to those a little bit more quickly. I also think that, like anxiety it's interesting because I think in one way your anxiety decreases when you come back because now you're back on Earth, you're not stuck in a really confined environment anymore. But at the same time, like Bailey was talking about, yeah, you've just left all of humanity for 2 years and you've come back and now you just have a lot more people, press conferences, you're reintroduced to your family, your pets, everyone. And it's just like a little bit of a mental shock, I guess. So in one aspect, your anxiety is increasing because you're now having to deal with things that you haven't dealt with in 2+ years. And in some other ways, your anxiety is decreasing because those stress or pain points that you were dealing with in space are no longer there because you're back on Earth. You can go take a walk. You just have a lot more access to the things that you were able to do before, and you have a lot more access to different coping mechanisms that you may not have necessarily had in space.
Yeah, and also like kind of speaking on that, like when you're in space for those 2 years, life on Earth still does go on. I mean, these astronauts are missing countless birthdays, countless holidays, like, and their families and the people that they know are growing and changing and becoming new people. So I feel like that reintroduction is kind of like scary when you realize that like your family can be an entire different, like they could just have an entirely different dynamic. Like, and your relationship with those people could be changed.
Yeah, I think even there was this one book that I read, which I really loved. It was actually introduced to me by another student here at USC last semester, but How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And one of the things that he literally talked about in that book was that people have a desire to feel important. So imagine you're literally in space and you have this kind of almost like subconscious realization that, wait, people can live their lives without you. Like, life can go on without you, life can function without you, and the impact that it has, at least the way you perceive it to be, is like minuscule. And so you come back to Earth with this realization that not only has everyone's lives changed in the past, X amount of time that you've been gone, but they could be different in ways that you like or ways that you don't like. They might have adapted, and there's so much for you to catch up on. It's almost like, I think the best parallel I could bring to it is when you're in a friend group and they're talking about all these events or things that they're doing, but you don't know because you almost feel like excluded inadvertently. And it's not anybody's fault, but it's just this like feeling of exclusion and this feeling of, oh my God, I don't know what's happened, I haven't been here. Everyone seems to be fine without me. Oh no, do I even belong? Like all those kinds of questions seem to re-enter, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I feel like that's just extremely important to talk about because we recognize and we honor these people who have like been in space for countless years, but we don't inherently understand that like the problems that could come along with like staying in space that long.
Yeah, I feel like in some sense, being in space kind of can amplify the problems that we're used to experiencing here, but it can be a lot more drastic in space, whether it's anxiety, depression, isolation, feelings of exclusion, maybe perhaps a sense of like a loss of importance to the people who are in your lives, a lack of privacy, a lack of, just kind of cohesion, understanding with the group of people you're with. There's so much, and I think, to a sense, like, you and I, we kind of experience this in certain different ways, and even for you guys out there, you might be able to relate to some of these things, but to an extent, we'll never know what it's truly like for astronauts in space, and how it is for them to deal with all of those pressures, and then execute on all the tasks and the functions of their job effectively while they're dealing with all of these different things.
Yeah, and like also you kind of have to you also have to take into account the baggage that these astronauts are bringing to space with them. I mean, their life pre-space isn't like this perfect happy-go-lucky life. They have their own distinct issues that they kind of deal with on their day-to-day life, and going to space could like even amplify that. Kind of which like brings us to our next person that we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about Lisa Nowak. So kind of some background on Lisa Nowak. She was born in Washington, D.C. in 1963. And she first became interested in space at the age of 5 when she saw the lunar landing in '69. And then ever since then, she, dedicated herself to kind of learning more about space. She got her undergraduate degree from the Naval Academy in aerospace engineering, and she went to the Naval Academy for her master's in aerospace engineering as well. Kind of going into her life like as an astronaut, she first started at NASA in the space program in 1996. When she got approved to be a part of the mission and a part of like the team, but she didn't officially go on a mission until 10 years later in 2006. But her time working at NASA, or she was married to this man. His name was Richard, and he was her classmate at the Naval Academy. They eventually got married and they had 3 kids together, one boy and twin girls. However, when Lisa Nowak was training for her mission at NASA, she met another astronaut in training, and his name was William O'Fallon. You know, they had kind of this intense relationship, this back and forth, and then Lisa went into space in 2006.
Yeah, I think it's like, so first of all, just kind of listening to a little bit of the backstory. Born in Washington, D.C., had an interest in
Seems like
space.
someone I know.
Grew up with like an interest. Yeah, just a little bit on the nose. But yeah, I think it was so interesting because she was literally married, had 3 children, did the whole like dream astronaut story where she went to an amazing college, got an amazing program, got her degrees, did the training, applied, was picked, what her application was picked out of a pile of around like 2,000 applications when NASA was recruiting for new astronauts. And then essentially, from my understanding, she had met William at like a training survival camp that they had these astronauts do where she cheated. That's what happened. She cheated on her husband with William O'Fallon in the woods.
A very intense situation, if you get what I'm
Yeah.
throwing down. Yeah. But anyways, diving more into it. So eventually after Lisa Nowak came back from her space travel, kind of to dive deeper into like her space travel, she was a part of mission STS-121, which was a mission that her primary goal was to like kind of fix some of like the mishaps that they had in space, and also to develop new technology for landing. Lisa's role, a part of this mission, was to control the robotic arm that was used to fix like a lot of the issues that were in space. But when she returned, she still had this relationship going on with William. Eventually, William had divorced from his wife, and, Lisa decided to follow his actions and divorce from her husband. Following the divorce, Lisa talked to William, but William had confided in her that he was in another relationship with another woman, which is crazy. Like, imagine divorcing your husband to be with another man, and that man that you divorced your husband for does not want you.
Yeah, that's why they say, like, if he cheated with you, he'll cheat on you. Like, it's very much like she took these drastic steps, ruined a perfectly healthy marriage. She had children involved, and, gets with this guy during the training camp, comes back, he breaks up, she breaks up. They get together, and then William is like, actually, I've started seeing somebody else, and, we can be friends. And the most deranged part, I think, about it all when I, found out about this whole relationship is that he basically pitched to Lisa and was like, like, we can be friends. I've started seeing this other girl that I'm interested in, and you're chill with that. And, of course she said yes. And he still let her have keys to his apartment and all of that kind of stuff and access. And she would still come over all the time. And he was like, yeah, that's totally normal. It's perfectly fine. He just didn't see anything. I think he just ignored a lot of like
Red
important
flags, yeah.
information and like red flags.
Yeah.
And even his then like Air Force girlfriend, I think, she literally asked him, was like, are you sure she's okay with this arrangement? And he was like, yeah, no, it's totally fine. And, meanwhile, Lisa Nowak was up to some very whack ideas.
Yeah, Lisa Nowak was, in fact, not chill with the relationship. While William was out on a trip for work, she broke into his apartment and decided to read his personal emails between him and this mystery woman.
Which were not password protected, by the way.
We're not.
Yes.
Which is crazy. So Lisa had gotten information that this mystery woman was flying from Houston to Orlando. Lisa Nowak currently at the time was in Texas, and decided that she was going to intercept this mystery woman at the airport in Orlando.
The mystery woman in question is Colleen Shipman, and she was in the Air Force. But yeah, I think it's just insane because like while we're on this whole topic, while William is in space, mind you, right? She breaks into his apartment, goes into his computer, which is not password protected, and like I don't even understand how you work in a field like aerospace, which is literally dealing with so much classified information, and you're not going to password protect your computer. That's crazy to me. And then she was reading basically all these like steamy messages between William and Colleen and reading all of that stuff. And then, yeah, that's when she found out about her whole path about, how she was going to fly into Orlando and just comes up with the craziest plan ever, not just to intercept her, but tell us more about that.
Okay. So Lisa decided that she was going to drive to Orlando, and I'm pretty sure the flight was coming in that night. So she decided that in order to lessen the time of the 900-mile trip, she was going to wear diapers to stop herself from using the restroom.
Yeah, I think the technical term, so they were called like maximum absorbency garments, and basically astronauts would wear them in space because, you don't really have the same kind of bathroom facilities. But she was so determined to intercept Colleen Shipman's flight that, yeah, she literally wore a diaper on her drive, a 900-mile drive from Texas to Florida.
It's just it's crazy. But essentially, when Lisa did get to Orlando, she ended up running into Colleen Shipman on the shuttle from the airport to the parking lot. Colleen had like recognized Lisa, not recognized who she was, but she had felt kind of this eerie feeling and noticed that Lisa was suspicious. And so eventually when they got to the parking lot, Colleen went straight to her car. That was when Lisa followed. Lisa approached Colleen's car and asked her if Colleen could give her a ride because her boyfriend forgot to pick her up from the airport. Colleen smartly declined. When she was trying to open the door to kind of talk to Lisa more, Lisa attempted to pepper spray Colleen, and that's when Colleen alerted the authorities.
Right. And it gets even more insane because, right, like Lisa had essentially been stalking Colleen to the airport. I think she had like a wig and glasses and this whole setup. And when she had come to Colleen's car, after, Colleen refused to give her a ride, she basically had then asked Colleen, like, if she could use Colleen's phone in order to call her boyfriend to come get her. And then when Colleen rolled her window down, she got pepper sprayed, and Lisa Nowak, just kind of said some not so nice things. And then after Colleen alerted the authorities and they showed up, it turned out that Lisa wanted to murder her. Like they had found I think like rope. Sorry guys, mild interruption. But there was rope in the car. There were like some nails, I think, and a couple of other materials, along with some photos of a nude woman that police were not able to identify. She basically wanted to kill Colleen Shipman. So, I guess against the belief of William, Lisa was very much not fine with the relationship and really tried to harm Colleen Shipman. And thankfully nothing ended up happening, but what was the result after?
Okay, so kind of the result when authorities got there, they found out that Lisa's name was Lisa, and they asked Colleen if she knew who Lisa was. Lisa had, or not Lisa, Colleen had remembered Lisa's name because William had accidentally called Colleen Lisa in bed. So she kind of put two and two together and realized that that was the Lisa that they were talking about. And then kind of like going into the trial, Lisa's lawyer tried to deny that Lisa was wearing a diaper the 900-mile journey, which I think is the crazy thing to focus on when your client is up for attempted murder. But I mean, at least he was trying to save the little bit of dignity that Lisa could have had.
It was also interesting because when the trial came to light, I think there's military law and it has a little bit of differences with like civilian law. And part of being in the military is that in adultery is frowned upon. And so because of the whole trial and everything that Lisa had done, Colleen Shipman and William Opheline were both dismissed from NASA because of their affair that had come to light. And so that was one problem. But then also, after that had happened, because of the impending trial against Lisa Nowak, the military decided that they were going to put their own punishments on her after the courts had decided what to do with her. But she, yeah, all her future contracts and like missions that she was supposed to do were terminated, and all the things had started coming to light about the diaper, the murder plan, the messages, the text message, like every single piece of evidence just started blowing up, and it got a lot of like, national attention. And the crazy part about all of this, I think, is that some of her missions were on the Endeavour shuttle, which we talked about in our first episode. The one that's literally behind us right now, that's getting ready to be transported, was home to basically an attempted murderer astronaut.
Yeah, it's crazy. Lisa eventually ended up pleading insanity, and her lawyer mentioned that she suffered from OCD, insomnia, and depression. And kind of like speaking on like the mental health aspect, like we were before, I think it's kind of like apparent that like going to space could have like amplified these feelings that she was already feeling before. She was probably feeling a lot of like stresses and anxieties with having an affair on her husband, and I feel like going to space has definitely had an impact on it.
Oh yeah, because there were like a couple of I think like noteworthy points about Lisa Nowak that I think would have really contributed to her like a deteriorating mental health. I think it would have been to the benefit of NASA and the military and every other agency that she was working with to probably conduct regular psychiatric evaluations of all their astronauts, which they didn't back then. But in addition to dealing with all the mental health issues that kind of come with being an astronaut that we touched on earlier, she was a mother. She was also a wife. She, was having an affair. And, during this whole timeline, she dealt with, a divorce. She dealt with an affair. She dealt with the break of an affair. And also during this time, actually, one of her friends slash coworkers died in the space Challenger incident, I believe. There was like a shuttle that blew up and killed all the astronauts that were on board, one of them who was, I guess, in her class. And so she took care of her kids as well during this time. So she was dealing with grief and then, dealing with the confined space. And then as we were talking about, like Bailey was talking about how life really goes on when you're on these missions and so many things are happening, behind you that you're just kind of not involved in. And so dealing with the breakup and then coming back to Earth and finding out that this whole relationship that you don't really approve of has gone on and progressed, and that feel like all of these feelings of hurt and shame and guilt and grief and anger and frustration and then the lack of support for her during this time as well, I think is something that really could have attributed to that. And the taboo, like you can't talk about like heartbreak if the heartbreak is from an affair.
Yeah.
Who are you going to talk to about it?
Exactly.
That was genuinely insane. After that whole trial and the publicized events of it all, I think, was there like a movie or something had come out after in
Yeah.
its wake?
So there's a movie called Lucy in the Sky. It came out in 2019. And it's centered around kind of Lisa's life and based on it. And it starred Natalie Portman. Unfortunately, the film did not do the best when it came out. It had a budget of $21 million, but they only had an income of $300,000 in box.
Maybe they could have done, I don't know. Personally, I feel like if I was on the marketing team for the movie, I would have probably harped on the diaper thing a lot. I don't know why, but like that was one of the most sensationalized parts of the case. And like, I don't know how their marketing dealt with that. But in regards to the actual substance of the film, did it like touch on the mental health issues that she would have faced? Did it
Yeah,
focus more on the story?
It focused a lot on the story, but not necessarily like the toll that it had on her mental health, which I feel like is like definitely a big part of the whole situation. I mean, it's kind of what like enabled her, I guess you could say, attempt to commit this murder. So like, I don't know. It's definitely interesting, and I wish that the film would have like focused more on the mental health side of it.
Yeah, but needless to say, with Lisa Nowak's case in particular, it it really was such a it was such a mind-boggling moment, I think, for the military and for NASA and for the public and for everyone, just because of the drama of this entire issue, and like the fact that we just felt like these issues didn't really happen to astronauts, and then like Lisa's case happened, and I think like NASA made a lot of changes to their mental health interventions like in its wake. And so, I kind of wanted to talk a bit about that. What did NASA change after this situation?
So, following the case with Lisa Nowak, NASA decided that they were going to conduct annual psychiatric like evaluations of their astronauts. Lisa Nowak had her initial evaluation in 1996, but following that, there was no checkups on her mental health, and a lot could happen in that 10 years that she was a part of the program. So I feel like it was definitely the right decision for NASA to make. I mean, your mental health is forever changing. I know, like, we're not the same as, or any person is not the same person as they used to be mentally, like 10 years prior. I'm not the same way that I was mentally when I was 8 years old. So it's like, it's definitely a big change. And I feel like if they had done these psycho evaluations, it could have prevented a lot of conflict between people.
Yeah, I think like regular psychiatric testing and evaluation is important. I think we also do a better job of it in other environments now, like academics. Like they take a lot of time to make sure that students' mental health is, good. At least I think USC does a pretty decent job of it. And so I think like, yeah, even in industry, it's good that NASA started implementing that. But there is some other information that I have regarding that. So it's really interesting. NASA states it's for astronauts. In terms of mental health solvency, they conduct research to better understand the physiological and behavioral responses to spaceflight. They develop and test interventions that lead to better adaptation and performance. They have in-mission support, which they kind of classify as care packages, teleconferences with a psychologist, and journaling. They, of course, encourage exercise. And one of the big things that they focus on for mental health is also sleep, because astronauts aboard the ISS see 16 sunrises and sunsets a day because they're not fixed in one location like they would be on Earth, right? They're in space, and so they're constantly getting this like disruption to their sleep cycle. So because they suffer from like a lack of natural light and these constant disruptions to their circadian rhythm, they have special LED lighting, noise canceling earbuds, sleep masks, sleep pods, and dedicated relaxation time. And so I think that like these are all definitely improvements, but I feel like there's still some room for improvement, I guess
Yeah.
you could say. Like, I mean, when you hear the mental health support that NASA provides, like what do you think of it?
I mean, it definitely could be better. I feel like part of the part of the problem with it is the lack of privacy. It's nice that NASA is providing these astronauts with like psychologists and like therapists to like deal with whatever is going on in their life. But part of the part of like the downfall of it is that everybody on board is kind of hearing what you have to say about your personal experiences, and especially talking about it in a vulnerable space that is like usually it would be more private if you were here on Earth. They were able to like, build up the privacy that astronauts kind of need in order to talk about like these difficult experiences without lurking ears. I feel like that would definitely be an improvement.
Yeah, that's a big thing. It's like, okay, you get a psychologist, you get a therapist, and you're stuck in a studio sized apartment with like 5, 6, 7 people. That's not very comforting. But another problem I think as well was the fact that like they have like such a big problem with, I think, like they talk about how they do a lot of research to find out what the effects are for astronauts like mentally. But I think it's kind of stressful because, as we kind of had mentioned a little bit earlier, space exploration and the human exploration in space in and of itself is like pretty new. And so I think it's like because human exploration in space is really new, even though we're conducting research, it's a little bit difficult to get all of that research that you would need. And then between the time that research is executed and then implemented into active solutions, there can be a bit of a lag. And so I think that like astronauts would probably suffer from maybe not getting all the care that they need just because of the fact that like maybe all of the information that we need to know about what kind of treatments and interventions they need isn't completely fully known yet. So now that we've kind of talked about, the changes that NASA made with the mental health interventions, and we briefly touched on like Lucy in the Sky. I think it would be really cool to also look into some other pieces of film that have really actually touched on mental health in space. And one that I really wanted to talk about was Interstellar.
Yeah. Do you want to debrief us on it?
Yeah, so just I guess the really quick TLDR on Interstellar is that in this dystopian universe, humanity is on the brink of death. And so they need to create a space mission in order to assess one of the different viable planets that there are in order to figure out where humanity will have the biggest chance of success for survival. And so one of the astronauts that is chosen, his name is Cooper, and he has a daughter and a son, and he leaves them behind to basically go and help with humanity's mission so that they all survive. And over the course of the film, you see them go through these different space missions and ultimately seeing how it impacts humanity. But, in regards to the mental health portion, I think actually the relationship between Cooper, who's the protagonist, and his daughter, Murph, was really important. Do you want to tell us about like some moments that stuck out to you?
Yeah, so one of the big moments in the film definitely brought a tear to my eye and a lot of other viewers was the moment when his daughter sent him a special message and said that it was a special birthday for her because it was the birthday that he left, which speaks volumes. I mean,
The birthday that he left?
the birthday or the she was the age that he was when he left on the
Oh,
mission.
okay.
Yes. um and I feel like that just like speaks volumes. It's definitely like the more exaggerated situation of what we're seeing in our current day, but it's still important to kind of recognize that this is what like could eventually be happening in the future of the space industry. You know, people going on these missions for lifetimes.
Yeah. So in the universe of Interstellar, it's also just, again, like this takes place in the future and there's a lot of heavy science involved. I would really encourage our viewers to look into like the Science of Interstellar video that was made by Neil deGrasse Tyson, which I think is really cool. But yeah, when they're doing these future space explorations, they're going to different parts of the universe where the time distortion between Earth and the planet that they're on is vastly different. So, for example, there was like a planet that they go to, like the giant water planet, and they're trying to explore this planet, and they basically only have 1 hour to explore the planet because I can't remember the exact time scale, but I believe it was something around like every 7 minutes, like a year passes on Earth, or some sort of basic like time leap where the distortion between the time on Earth and the time on this planet is so drastic. By the time that Cooper's team finishes that mission, and they have some trouble during that mission as well, and he gets back onto that ship and he sees his daughter's message, he realizes that, for him, the way he's perceiving time is really different. But like what he's missing on Earth in terms of all the development with his children and his family and all of that is so much greater. And so he's seeing his daughter sending him this message where she's heartbroken and devastated and has basically given up on her father because she doesn't know if he's dead, alive, is coming back home, what is going on with that at all. And it just goes to show, again, like a more exaggerated version of how it is so mentally challenging for astronauts in space to be isolated and away from your loved ones. And even though you know that what you're working on is for the betterment of humanity and that you're, really changing, like I think mankind's future for the better, moments like that in the film, I think were so painful to watch.
Yeah, and I feel like it definitely shines light on like kind of darkness that comes with being an astronaut and being a part of this space like industry is that are making these grave impacts, but at what toll? At what cost to yourself and what cost to your relationships with your families or just your life in general? Like you're sacrificing a lot in order to, improve life for every single.
Yeah, I think it is very much almost like a tragedy of the commons. It's like you either have to sacrifice and everybody else benefits, or you as an individual don't sacrifice, but everybody else follows that same mentality. And so everybody suffers. And so it kind of begs the question to, each individual, whether you're an astronaut or not, or what job you're working in, what industry, it's like, what are you willing to sacrifice and how much are you willing to sacrifice for the greater good, and how much are you willing to give up so that other people can be better off, and what kind of impact does that have on you, and how well treated do you feel for the things that you give up.
And the spin on that, like more of like an optimistic tone, is like, what can we do as society in order to benefit the people who are sacrificing everything in order for our benefit? There's people out there, we don't know their names, we don't know their stories, but we know that what they are doing is changing life for every single person. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful to think about.
Yeah. As much as we glorify being an astronaut and working in space, like any other industry, there's its pros and its cons. And, today we talked about 2 different case studies with Lisa Nowak and James Donald Halsell. We also talked about the different impacts that being in space can have on both astronauts' mental and physical health, the kind of changes that NASA made in the aftermath of, that situation. And then also talked about like some case studies from film and entertainment that examine the issues of mental health with, astronauts. So we really hoped you enjoyed today's episode. And, if you liked this episode like you liked all of our other episodes, we hope, please like, subscribe, share, show some support for Space Chai.
Period. And that's the team.
Yes. Signing off.
Good luck, Charlie. We'll cut that out.